All right, what's up, guys? We're back online after a week break. Let me make sure it's coming through on my side. Looks like it is. Cool. I just have to pull up on my iPad real quick just so I can see the chat, and then we can kick it off. Let's see. And there we are. What's going on? What's up, Marcus? What's up, Anoctis? John O. Yeah, what's up, guys? Everyone's saying happy birthday. I really appreciate it. My birthday was yesterday or around this time. I probably have the worst OPSEC literally in crypto because I use my real name, my real face, and all the above. And you guys know where my birthday is, you know where I live, all those things. Yeah, but anyways, everyone already knows my birthday anyways, so I'm sure there's people trying to brute force my passwords as we speak. So I guess I just have to deal with that. But I appreciate the birthday wishes anyways. What's up, Marcus? Steakhouse, I was at on Instagram. I had clients that took me out that I used to work with. It was the Salt Bays restaurant. I believe it's called Nusret or something. I don't know I can't pronounce. I'm pronouncing that wrong. But he has locations in New York and Miami and wherever he's from as well. It was pretty good. It was really good. Family style. What else? What's up, Lawrence? Robin? What's going on, Phil? Good evening from London. What's going on over there? What's up, Surf? David? Carlos? We're back. Kebola. What's up, Mitch? I won't tell Randy you said that. All right, let's get right into it. But I did see that segment. I know what you're talking about. Nusrat. Yeah, exactly right. All right, guys, we have a bunch to cover. Yeah, it was an alright time. What's up here? A lot of you guys in here today. Really nice to be back. Really nice to be back, kind of in the grind. I do like going to conferences. It does give me some insight. I do get to connect with. What's up, asleep? Appreciate it, man. I do get to connect with some people and possibly get some deals and definitely get some insight and some information that's probably not available elsewhere. But at the same time, having to take kind of 3 or 4 days off in a row, especially after like a day of travel, is really tough. And I'd rather kind of focus on this, my first priority, as well as I didn't really get a trade either, or kind of look at what was moving and possibly take profits on things like Tomo and stuff. So this is definitely what I'd rather be spending time on. I think I put this in announcements. If you missed it, I'm probably going to avoid going to any conferences or any meetups like that just for a little bit. I did a lot of that probably the last month or two, and I just really want to get back to kind of producing content and really focusing on trading. So bearing down. Thanks everyone for kind of bearing with me this week and understanding. And I put this in the announcements if you missed it. None of that counted, so it's totally free week since I didn't get a stream or anything. Anyways, we're back to it. Happy to be here. The outlook is a little bit bleak if you look across Twitter, if you look even kind of in the group. It's interesting kind of getting that sentiment analysis, and I get a bunch of inbound from different channels. But right now, it almost seems just as bleak as when we were at 6.6, which is pretty interesting to me, considering where alts have moved since the beginning of April, considering where Bitcoin is since kind of the beginning of April as well. So it's interesting that it's this bleak kind of an outlook. So I want to touch on that, touch on all that, touch on Bitcoin technically is what we're going to look at. That's how I always like to start it. Past that, we're going to look at those alts. I want to do one macro view first of ETH, which is actually kind of showing something a little bit different than what I believe is happening in the entire alt space. Asleep. He said, I'm pretty sure Bitcoin dips almost every time you're traveling. That's true. That's back tested. Mr. Clean and Tommy, I think they always short Bitcoin when I hop on a plane. So that's not financial advice, but I think you'd make a lot of money if you did that. And then, so after looking at Bitcoin, what I was saying was ETH is showing something a little bit different than what I kind of believe is happening in the alt space. And with ETH, we kind of just jumped another level up. Now we're consolidating above a resistance. And this has happened so many times, even just kind of in the shortened alt cycle. Since April, I feel like we've had a lot of scenarios like this where we're, kind of consolidating above resistance. So I want to talk about what ETH is showing for alts and then kind of my view on alts. There's a lot of uncertainty. I'm already starting to see kind of a lot of I told you so's on Twitter and stuff like welcome to crypto and different things out there. So I want to touch on that, and then we're going to go to individual alts. So I'm going to touch on kind of those positions that I consolidated, why I even do want to consolidate right now, any new positions I'm looking at, um, and stuff like that. Surf, we'll definitely cover that. I'm going to cover that right after I hit Bitcoin. All right, cool. Let me jump right into it. As Bitcoin is bouncing, which is what I like to see. I'm not convinced yet though. So let's dive in here, guys. Just a quick recap before I kind of get current, right? If I think the last time we were talking was on the 11th, that was almost exactly a week ago, right? So the two supports that I was looking at after this resistance held up, this is literally in the last stream. If you watch kind of the first 5 or 10 minutes, we were talking about this selling, not this selling, this resistance zone. We weren't able to confirm or close above 94.5. As far away as that sounds, 94.5 now. We weren't able to close above it. That was kind of a sign that we were heading lower. So I wanted to pick out two horizontal support levels that I thought we would be heading next, right? Those two levels were 835 or kind of this 8400 range. And this is just based off previous resistance, also previous horizontal support. You can kind of see where I highlighted this in the past. And then one level below it, which is really down at 7,800, which seems to be kind of a hot level. I've seen now in the last kind of 24 or 48 hours, it seems like everyone on Twitter is calling for 7,800. It seems to be kind of the popular pick right now. Right, so these are the two levels we've had on the chart for almost a week and a half. Just today, we finally got down to 7,800 8K. What's up, Josh? Just got down to 7,800 8K, and we got a nice little bounce. This came right after I put that news into Bitcoin trend analysis, showing that tether. All right, let me pop over to that. That's not what I want. Right, showing that the FOMO bot, and this is just really a bot I think that picks up, I think it looks at the Omni Explorer, which is really just the tether pickup, and then you also have the ETH giveaway scammers. This is just picking up that tether has been granted. If this would have happened a few months ago, when everyone used to talk about kind of the tether, whether or not that was a scam, I think a lot of that discussion has died off. I think rightfully so. I never bought into any of that conspiracy, guys. I know it is murky in how kind of the market structure and all this works. I don't think there's any wrongdoing going on with tether. I just believe it's how a lot of institutions and certain, whether it's exchanges, whether it's a conglomerate, whether it's a couple of hedge funds, it's how certain people are getting into the space, or it's how certain people are liquidating. And in the past, it's had a really high correlation with Bitcoin performing well, or at least demand stepping up after those tethers are granted. What's up, John? What's up, Jorge? Yeah, John also liked 7,800 before everyone started calling for it. Yeah, it's interesting. 7,800 kind of became the thing, and that's not a slight to anyone that just started calling it today. I agree. I think it's an important level. It's just something that we've definitely had our eyes on. Anyways, there was just tethers granted today, and this kind of is coinciding at the exact same time with Bitcoin finally touching down at the support and getting a small bounce. Nothing convincing yet, right? Only up a few, $200, $400. Oh, no way, Mr. Clean. All right, we finally see your name. What's up? What's up? It threw me off right there. I was kind of wondering where you were anyways in the stream. So anyways, that's coinciding with a nice little bounce right here. I'm not convinced, as we would kind of need to pass this 83, 8,400 again. Right, this previous now support, this was support level, I expect it to be a resistance. So if I'm just going to flip this down, you can see where it was previous resistance. So that's kind of where I'm watching to see if price can actually break above that. Right, so not convinced at all yet. If we want to look at kind of some of the shorter time frame patterns before I kind of get into like the macro view of what I really think is going to happen with Bitcoin, well, let me just give you the two other looks that I've also seen kind of floating around Twitter, which I think are some really nice kind of ideas, some nice looks I've seen. This one is more of a falling wedge. All right, and I think they were actually connecting this one. All right, that's probably the one that I would use. All right, so looking at that falling wedge, I see a lot of people looking at that. And I mentioned this in the Bitcoin trend analysis. I'm going to get rid of some of these shapes, guys, just so you can see this a little bit more clear. I know I can always see it clear, but I know not to everyone else's eyes, it's easy to see. So if we're looking at this falling wedge, I'm just going to outline this in some other color like blue. Right, the one thing that I always want to focus on to hit on when I'm looking at patterns of Bitcoin is that none of these, an unfinished pattern is just that, right? It's a setup, and there's no confirmation Something that's a bullish pattern is only bullish if it confirms, correct? Everyone's joking about Mr. Clean being fully doxxed. Mr. Clean, it's okay. Now you know how I feel. Now welcome to the world of doxed, and now you walk around checking your 2FA every single day. It's a scary thing. Anyways, this pattern is not confirmed bullish until we were to get a breakout of this resistance. This resistance is going to kind of line up exactly where that horizontal resistance is, right? So this area is going to be pretty important, this 8,400. That's an area to watch if you're watching the falling wedge, if you're a pattern trader, right? I'm more looking at just these horizontal levels, but I think it's worth a look. Another level, another trend line, I should say, that I saw people looking at, I saw people drawing, is coming from this one. It's coming from the bottom of that fib way back here at about 3K, right? Extending here, and then just extending out. And you can see that support is actually going to be right around, if price was really to drop to the 7,800 level, it's going to kind of line up. It's going to be a nice little confluence with this horizontal support we're already painting, right? So one to kind of look at two different looks there. I know I'm only really looking at these horizontal levels, but if we're going to look at some other trend lines, some other things that you can either validate or kind of go against what you're looking at, I think they're important to keep in mind. I think they're both valid and worth taking a look at. My kind of view on what's going to happen with Bitcoin, I guess I should give kind of a recap of consensus first before I dive in. Consensus was interesting this year. Consensus was very different, and I only went to Consensus Invest last November, but I was in the space during Consensus last year, and I was pretty active in tracking it. This year's Consensus, and just getting a gauge from all the other conferences I've been to, Chris Berniski put it really clearly on Twitter. He put it, I think he said that a lot of people were fatigued. They kind of came off as, what was the word he used? It was almost like snarky. It, jaded, I think, is actually the word he used. It was a very different atmosphere. It was almost a sense of accomplishment is kind of what I felt being around everyone this last week in New York, as opposed to last November. It was a lot more about excitement. It was a lot more about building and kind of what people were going to tackle, what was going to happen in the next 6 months. That really wasn't the vibe, right? It was a lot more about like how far we had come, and a lot really less focus on kind of the next 3 to 6 months. It was almost kind of it was weird, and you could tell people did seem a little bit tired as well. Certainly for a lot of the pitches, certainly for kind of the optimism, it wasn't as strong, right? It just seemed that people were a little bit faded in kind of their outlooks. Not a lot of conviction either way, right? More just kind of people were just there, right? So there were definitely some big announcements, and there were some really positive announcements, specifically for a few large cap alts getting added to Gemini, specifically for Bitcoin and the NASDAQ exchange coming up. Yeah, exactly right. Andy quoted it. Jaded and fatigued, and that was reflected in the market. I think that's exactly right. I think people were fatigued. I think a lot of the meetings that I had people with, really the only activity that was going on that felt kind of exciting and that people were really biting for was new ICO deals. And whether, take that for what it is, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's really the only thing that had people going, right? Was how do I secure an allocation to this? Kind of what is the next ICO deal here? How can we have them lower their cap from 30 million to 20 million? Different things like that. It was kind of a lot less excitement about, how is Bitcoin going to start being accepted as a payment and, banks getting in and different things like that. It was a lot more about kind of it felt different. I think Chris summed it up perfect. The one major kind of announcement that came from this, and the two themes that I want to pick on, the major announcement was NASDAQ. They're going to launch kind of an exchange focused on cryptocurrency. The two themes that I want to pick on were the ICOs. It seems that everyone was really just gunning for ICOs, whether that's right or wrong, take it for what it is. And then also the regulatory uncertainty is still there. I watched two panels from the CFTC, from the SEC, and from the DOJ that were all there, and they pretty much all went with the same thing. They just said, this is a really tough space. We're all kind of viewing this differently. We're going to continue to try to pound something out. For now, err on the side of caution. And, they kind of admitted, yes, a lot of things are probably securities. A lot of ICOs are probably working around the rules, but there's just not a lot of clear regulatory kind of framework, at least here in the United States. Right, so those were kind of the two themes. A lot of people just gunning for ICOs and a lot of regulatory uncertainty. And it seems like everyone was just kind of waiting on that. The smarter discussions were kind of the insight that I was getting from people that I respect in the industry was that institutional inflow is going to start coming in Q3, Q4, and there was talks about the ETF is pretty much squared away, right? So these were rumblings. These were not. This was not a talk. This is not verified. This is not 100%. Those were kind of the two rumblings or the two whispers that I would say smart money was kind of talking about, right? Those were the whispers in the crowd. So that's what I'm looking at for Bitcoin. Technically, the outlook, take all that kind of consensus stuff for what it was. Technically, what I'm thinking, my view remains, right? And my view is ever since we broke out of this, I know this chart is a little bit messy. This chart's a little bit loud. Just focus on this line with me. If we look at this downtrend line back here, right? I kind of called this the defining downtrend line. This is from all-time high up here to that first peak, and then just extending down. And you can see the breakout here, right? And ever since we've been moving up. My view is after we broke out of this defining downtrend, that the trend was reversed. And if you just clearly zoom out, if we're not using any drawing tools at all, yes, we are seeing lower highs consecutively ever since the all-time high. And this is for about 5 months straight. But we're also now seeing kind of our first, I would even mark this as kind of a first higher low. Even if I didn't, I would say this is kind of the first. If this is the low, this is at least the same, same, it's not a lower low, right? So to me, so far, after we've broke out of this defining downtrend line right here, all of this that's going on right now, to me, in my opinion, once again, guys, this is definitely not, I'm not always going to be right. I'm just trying to get a beat on it. This to me is still Bitcoin marking its first higher low, right? It hasn't marked it yet. We're definitely still trending down. But if it did mark its first higher low, it would further kind of confirm my view that we are headed up. So we haven't seen true capitulation yet. Maybe we do. If we kind of break through 7,800, we kind of get some capitulation like we saw right here, right? There's also a little bit of a gap right here. So maybe we do see some selling through here. But in my opinion, we still have kind of reversed from the downtrend. This was that defining downtrend line right here. And ever since we broke out of that, right, I've kind of viewed this as the trend has reversed. That has been my take, and my view is I still want to be net long. And that might not, depending on your trading approach. I know some guys are shorter time frames. I'm kind of more of longer time frame, trying to catch the bigger moves, and trying to just kind of stay exposed to futures. So that works for some people. It doesn't work for some people. Even if you're not a leverage trader, I liked this as a bid zone. I still liked this as a bid zone, even if it's like $100 or $200 underwater right now. I'm okay with that. So that's still my view on Bitcoin. I know a lot of other people across Twitter and some other places are really shaky. I don't like seeing Bitcoin go down either, right? But to me, this is completely normal, and this is what I looked at a week ago, and I kind of expected to happen. That's why I picked these two support levels, right? It doesn't make me happy that it happened. I lost money as it's happening, right? But that's technically what I was looking at. If I'm trying to remove the bias, that's where I'm kind of picking the next. That's where we move next. Right, so now what I'm looking for, I want to see a close above 8,400. To me, that's a very bullish sign, the sign that we move probably back up to at least 9,200, right? If not, I would at least like to see the dailies continue to close above this 7,800 level, right? This horizontal support. And you can see every single time we've touched the support and dailies have closed above, that's an important horizontal level. If we get a daily close below, that's last time we dropped down to 6.6. Right, so I'm viewing the 7,800 as pretty important. So I know I just spent a lot of time on Bitcoin, but I wanted to get back up to speed with everyone, especially since Bitcoin's kind of the most important coin in the space, the king shitcoin, if you will. All right, cool. Bitcoin out of the way. That's what I'm looking at. I'm going to keep this one updated, especially as we get close to kind of this old support acting possibly as resistance. If there's any other questions about that, one other quick comment I saw, I see a lot of guys on Twitter and elsewhere talking about OTC demand being still off the charts. One of those things, it's one of those things, there's not open source data on that. You just have to either know someone that's buying OTC, you have to be an OTC dealer, or you have to be buying OTC yourself. That's still the word that I'm getting, right? But it's kind of not still being reflected in price. The reason that people buy OTC is there's just a small float. You can't really buy that much on exchanges, and a lot of exchanges will limit it. Apparently, it's still happening. I didn't talk to anyone about OTC this week, but it was still happening at 9K when I talked to Jeremy Gardner, and it's still apparently happening to some of the guys that I see on Twitter talking about it. So Something to keep in mind. And I'm not even being a perma bull. That's just my view, right? So that's what I got for Bitcoin. I am that long. What's next, guys? So the alts that I wanted to look at, I kind of want to take a quick macro view. And before we jump into the inner ones, got to bounce. Cheers, guys. Later, Lawrence. Talk to you tomorrow, man. All right, guys. So looking at ETH now and what this is for alts, or what this means for alts, I should say, from the last stream. Once again, we were looking at ETH being stuck at this resistance, right, as it stair steps up. Real quick, as it stair steps up each of these kind of fib levels. This is kind of a general timing guide. I don't need to repeat myself too many times. I think you guys know what I mean. Right, so we moved back up. This was the last stream, 511, I imagine. We were still below this resistance, and we were looking at a possible level that it could dip to before it moves up. Right, it just so happens we were looking at this level to kind of be that bounce. It did not place a trade there, right? But these were the two levels that we were looking at before it moved on up. Right, I also have a piece I tweeted about that, and it's a video link. Now we're starting to consolidate, and you can see this pattern has happened a few times before. So I'm going to actually delete all these boxes, make this really kind of clear for how this has worked in the past. And Surf, I haven't forgot your question about divergence. I am going to get to it. All right, so if we're looking at how this ETH has kind of stair-stepped up these different fib ranges, right, let's take a quick look. As it moves up, usually we get a quick touch on resistance, sharp move down, it moves above, and then we kind of consolidate before we move higher up the next fib range. Right, so we have the sharp move down, it moves above, and then we consolidate above the resistance before a move up to the next fib level. So once again, we have the sharp move down, then it moves up, and now we're once again consolidating above resistance. So if we're quickly looking, yeah, of course, sir. If we're going to really quickly look at, backspace all these drawings, at how these consolidations and kind of how this, I guess you'd call it a fractal, has played out as price now consolidates above once again the fib resistance. Now I expect it to act as support. If we're using ETH as a timing guide, this would kind of tell you that alts are along supports and ready for their next leg up. Right? If I'm totally keeping this technical, if I'm totally keeping my bias and sentiment and everyone else's fear and emotions out of the window, if I'm looking at this completely technically and I'm using this as a timing guide, ETH is kind of telling me that we're consolidating above, and you can also see where this is previous resistance. ETH consolidating above that resistance, which is support, right? Also previous resistance back here and support. Now that it's kind of consolidating right at the support or above the resistance, it would tell me that ETH and other coins are ready for a next leg up. Whether that's a really short next leg up and it's only going to get us to something like right here, right? Or it gets us back kind of to the local high area, just basing it off this, right? Whether it can get us there or even all the way to, zoom out a little bit more, all the way kind of up to mid channel, right? Which would really be all-time high. You know, that remains in question. But if we're just looking at short-term movements or kind of the directional, kind of where is the trend going to go next, this is an indication that we do actually move up for alt. The tough part here is that ETH is kind of in a different place than every other alt is in the space. And what I mean by that, ETH, the way it's priced right now and kind of the way it's consolidating above the support, I think it looks different than almost every other alt I'm looking at or every other alt I'm trading. So if we're going to go back to kind of the beginning of April, right? If this is early April for ETH, this is the one similar part that ETH has in common with the other alts. Beginning of April, ETH was down here, and it's had a very nice run up, right? Ever since early April. And I saw a couple guys in the group and really across Twitter, you know, ETH is up 50, 60%. Kind of talking about how it's been really tough this month. They've watched a lot of their profits, you know, fall away from April. You know, almost all of their profits are evaporated. You know, I've definitely lost profits in May, but since early April, you know, I'm up considerably. So I wonder if that's still the case, or maybe it's kind of, maybe you were just talking about May. Later, Jorge. But, you know, taking into account kind of where this alt run started or where even ETH started, I imagine that most people are definitely still up since early April. I know May has not been as forgiving, right? If we're starting here for May. So taking that into account with ETH, technically it looks like ETH and other alts, if we're using this as a timing guide, are ready for a next leg up. I kind of want to talk about why ETH might not be the best timing guide. Okay, that makes sense, Machuno. Why ETH might not be the next timing guide. And Machuno, I really want to touch on that real quick, what he was talking about, because I always like seeing kind of you guys talk about that, and kind of my experience and passing that along as well, and kind of combining it with what everyone else is going through. So Machuno had a good comment. He was talking in general discussion about he is really sticking to his plan of not selling before it gets to targets, but at the same time, let's let a lot of the profits evaporate that he would have held. Right. So there's kind of two schools of thought here. One school of thought is, you set your predetermined targets and exits, and that's what I always do for my trades. So I have an entry, whether my entry is here, my target's up here, and then I exit at my targets. There's kind of another school of thought, Machuno, I'd be curious what you were doing before, and that's just kind of, I guess, selling. I'm not sure. I don't know where you would be selling if you didn't kind of pick a predetermined exit or loss, or predetermined exit. Maybe it's just selling kind of discretionarily, like whenever you think it's right, that's kind of when you sell. And I think there's an aspect of that which is still okay, but I try to stick with kind of staying systematic and picking my targets. So I'd be curious to know. The one thing I want to add is no one's ever going to be perfect, right? I imagine everyone, even if you did sell almost every single local top in alts, but you kept some exposure open, right? Everyone probably suffered some of a drawdown in May. And if someone didn't, right, if they sold the exact top in early, kind of the end of April, they suffered no drawdown in May, then introduce me to them. I would love to meet them. Um, because we're never going to be perfect. I would just, sorry, I'm reading a question. Sometimes I get a little off topic there. Sugar Spot. Hey Luke, on the ETH where are your top and bottom of those fibs? What do you think about that? Sugar Spot, it's back from the beginning right here. It's back from December up to kind of the high, and this was January 9th. Yeah, Machino, and not even to be reassuring, right? I could always do better, right? I could always 100% be better, and possibly maybe I wasn't in taking some profits. I took profits in definitely the biggest winners. Loom, I took a fair amount of profits when it got to Binance. That was a big win for me. XCP was able to exit with some profits. We went through some, and in most of the other coins, the profits were only 30 to 40%, and then I had a few of the big winners, right? Some of the smaller caps, which were able to move a lot more, and Loom that was able to move 3 or 4x, and then Tomo Chain, which I still really have all of it open, right? So took some profits, right? I always wish I would have taken more. John B, win alt season, Luke. So that's kind of the thing. That's kind of what I'm getting to, guys. I really think that alts are still in an uptrend, and that's kind of why it's interesting to me, especially since I took kind of 5 or 6 or 7 days off, that the sentiment has already shifted so negative and so much. And this has nothing to do with people in the group. This is simply observations of kind of the whole ecosystem. That the sentiment has kind of shifted so much, kind of looking at the crypto market is going terrible, and I'm losing money and stuff like that. When in actuality, in the last 2 months or kind of the month and a half, this has been a really kind of strong showing. And this is just ETH up 50%. Some other coins up, 3, 4, 5x. So to me, I'm still pretty positive, and a lot of the other alts, even if they did kind of move down, Josh, that's a really good question. I'll hit on that 1 second. Even if they did move down, I'm going to kind of look at the two strongest coins that we've been looking at. Even if they did move down, they're still making higher lows from early April. So the two coins that I want to first look at are Enigma, which kind of had that massive run, then it was a sell the news event. But in actuality, every single time Bitcoin kind of gains some stability, it's like it continues to move up, right? So we are seeing kind of massive intraday dumps. The interest, I think the dynamic in Machuno, this is kind of what I was trying to get at, and maybe I'm not kind of uh, communicating it clearly. It's interesting when I see on Twitter of someone say, oh, I took all my alt profits I sold all the local tops. I'm curious as to, are they getting back in now, or are they completely out of alts? Right? My kind of take in trying to time um, entire alt cycles, or kind of my whole mantra of moving slow, right, and trying to catch the greater trend, is a lot more about kind of being invested when we're in an uptrend, and then kind of slowly moving out once it's a clear downtrend, right? So maybe we miss some of the local tops, but my bets when I'm kind of identifying these alt trends, or identifying the alt cycle, or identifying kind of the biggest movers, is I want to be exposed when we're in an uptrend. And yes, maybe I go through a period of 2 weeks like in May, or 1 week, or whatever it is, that yes, maybe I do kind of underperform other people. But my experience in kind of riding these alt trends, or getting out of when it's an alt downtrend, is that as long as I can catch the bigger trend, I'll probably outperform someone who's going binary all in, all out at local tops and local bottoms, right? If they were perfect at it, then maybe I won't. But most people just aren't going to be that perfect. And I think my timing's good, but still, um, yeah, I kind of can't out time the larger cycle, if that makes sense, right? So taking profits definitely in some that get relatively expensive, right, and adding into some that are relatively cheap. But in my opinion, we're still in an uptrend. Is kind of how I'm looking at alts. So hopefully I kind of read a little bit circular there, but I think I explained that clearly. I think I said what I was trying to say. Josh said, on the flip side, do you ever regret taking profits? Josh, yeah, I definitely do. I think the 2017 alt cycle, I think I regretted taking profits a little bit too early. Um, but rarely. Um, if I leave a position open partially, I think it's really hard to kind of regret taking profits. What else? If you took profits, ICX, not so much. Luis, you mentioned something about smart money. Luis, I'm going to cover that at the very end. Let me get through some of these alts. Really good question though. Let me get through some of these alts that I want to look at. ENG is one of the ones I want to look at. This one, just like Enigma, we're almost right back at that original entry, right? I believe the entry is a little bit different than the one I'm looking at here. I believe it was something closer to this. Right, I believe it was a retest a lot closer to kind of the 27,000 sat range. So we did kind of have this massive dump now for the past, what was that, 3-4 days, but it's starting to gain some more stability, and in actuality we're still trending up, right? So nothing really changes for Enigma. I'm still holding Enigma. My target remains kind of 30,000. What was it? 38,000 was kind of my first target. Let me see what my last update was. I believe it was 38,000 is what I kind of said. I don't want to open up Binance right now. Where'd it go? Yep. So not there yet. 38,000 is kind of that first target range that I'm looking for Enigma. In my opinion, I still want to kind of be exposed to Enigma and Icon. So these are 2 coins that I'm continuing to hold on to, not consolidating these positions. And I'm going to kind of touch on why I want to consolidate some of the other ones. Icon, the exact same thing. Icon's just moving a little bit slower. I've kind of already gone over this, than where Enigma is in its course. Right, so no change for Enigma or Icon. I'm not consolidating either of those. I want to stay exposed to both. I consolidated a little bit of Loom, right, and I talked about this. It got down once again. It continues to kind of get down to this support, which we played a few times, and it can't make it back up to the all-time high. We moved into Loom back when it was, what was it, 50 million market cap, and now it's sitting at around a 360 million market cap, 274 now, kind of after the drop. So to me, kind of a lot of that play, a lot of that upside is kind of gone for Loom. It's not to say it's all gone, right? But I've taken kind of considerable profits. This is a much smaller position. This is smaller than a normal position size now for me in Loom, right? So I've kind of taken most of the profits. I've trimmed a lot of this position. It's made it to Binance. This trade, this play for me personally has kind of run its course. I continue to think it's a strong project. I definitely want some exposure to it, right? But it was a win for me. I'm happy to realize that win and kind of consolidate those profits and look for the next kind of concentrated play. So I wanted to update Loom there. I know someone was asking me, would I take another trade here? Would I look for something else? For me personally, I want to look for kind of the next big win. I want to look for another killer trade. Loom, I think, could be it. right? But as we continue to kind of test this demand zone, there's going to be less demand there, right? Less bids there every single time. It could also be forming a descending triangle, right? So I'm a little bit less excited about Loom. I don't think you need to panic sell or anything like that. I'm just a little bit less excited there. I want to consolidate some of this position and continue to kind of rein in some of those profits so I can use them for the next big play, right? I don't want to let kind of this coin dwindle away, let the profits run out, even if it drifts up, right? I wanted to get kind of out of that position. What else was there? There's 3 Bittrex coins, and I've talked about these a lot, guys, but I wanted to give a quick update on these. View, Edgeless, and XCP is kind of the one new trade idea I have. We've traded this in the past. It's been a nice trade in the past, but I wanted to give a quick update there. Mu and Edge are both right in their accumulation zone, and they're also right about to test that downtrend line, right? So I think Mu and Edgeless are both still in the entry support area. I know some people are staying away from Bittrex. Someone showed it as being the 60th exchange in volume. To me personally, as crazy as this sounds, guys, I honestly think Bittrex kind of will have a resurgence end of year. Seeing them on a panel with SEC and DOJ and CFTC was massive. For some reason, I think they are taking the steps. They are based in the U.S. I think they're going to be around for a while, and whether or not they have they have liquidity right now, maybe it's just because they're not wash trading. Maybe it's because they're under a different set of rules. I'm not going to not pay attention to these coins just because they're on Bittrex. To me, Mu and Edgeless are still in extremely attractive positions, right? So I don't think they're going to moon by themselves or anything like that, but I do think they're priced probably the best across most exchanges that I'm looking at. And if alts do rise, I think Edgeless and Mu both do very well. They're both kind of at a decision point, though. So there's an interesting point for both of them, right? So check out the alt trade ideas on both of those if you're interested in any Bittrex plays. They're a lot more like Cryptopia plays than they are like Binance plays. So for some reason, for some people that works. Some people don't like that strategy. It's a positional play. It's definitely not kind of an active trade that you're going to move in and set a sell tomorrow or set a sell today, right? Those are kind of plays that I like, right? It's kind of a low effort play, but for some people it's a little bit boring. Marcus says their new UI sucks. Their new UI does suck, Marcus. I am not going to counter argument that. It absolutely sucks. The other one that I wanted to look at was XCP. You guys know we've played this in the past, played this last alt cycle as well. This one's always a little bit different of a setup. The one thing that I wanted to look at here, I'm going to post this in the alt trade ideas so you can look at it in your own time. Counterparty, it's a Bitcoin project. We're right kind of back where we entered it originally when it gave us this 50% pop, right? So it's almost retraced fully. We took 50% profits right there. I didn't take any profits past that. Now it's forming this bull flag, right? On the daily, this is going to be kind of the flag pole. This is now the flag right on bull flag support. This green area that I'm shooting across, this is where the 2017 alt cycle started. This is kind of where that really brief alt cycle started, not only in December of 2017, but also this really brief alt cycle we just had in April, right? So we're right back at that level again for XCP. So I would add XCP to the list of Bittrex coins. If I have 3 coins on Bittrex that I think are worth playing a positional play for, setting some and forgetting is kind of what I'm saying there. It's XCP, Mu, and Edgeless. I know that strategy. I know that style doesn't work for everyone, but to me, I'm still going to play it. It's a boring style for some, but oh well. So that's what I'm looking at there. And then Icon and Enigma are kind of the 2 that I'm focusing on Binance. Everything else I'm really kind of holding back on in terms of the alt space. And then Tomo was the only other one that I added to today, right? And the only reason I'm doing that, guys, I expect more exchanges this month. It's still a project that I have extremely high conviction in. For me personally, a scaling solution for Ethereum should not be valued at kind of 60. It was at 66 million earlier today. If you remember when we first started moving into Tomo Chain, it was also valued at 66 million. To me, that's absurd. You kind of saw how well Loom did. It went from about 60 million up to about 300 million. So for me, I'm kind of not selling this until this is a 3, 4, 5x from here. That's just how I'm viewing Tomo Chain. So I added more to Tomo. This is one of those projects I just have kind of strong conviction in. The more I learned about it, the team, different things like that, different kind of things going on behind the scenes. I like what's going on with Tomo. So I wanted to kind of make everyone aware with that. Not financial advice. It's just what I'm doing. Everything else I'm kind of holding. The reason that I'm consolidating a lot of alts is because of this uncertainty with Bitcoin, is because I do think we could get kind of a massive move from Bitcoin. Bitcoin volatility has drowned out. It's definitely slowed significantly, right? And I think there's going to be a massive move upcoming, whether it strikes fear into alts or whether it's kind of a massive push up for alts. Either way, I do think alts are attractive, and I've kind of said that I want to stay exposed to alts, but I want to be kind of consolidated. I want to be have only a few positions and be able to kind of make concentrated plays on coins that I have high conviction in, and also be able to kind of consolidate back to Bitcoin in a quicker manner if I have to. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on as opposed to being spread out. I almost felt a little bit too spread out going into May. Right? That's the only reason I'm kind of trying to consolidate. Machuna has a good couple questions, and this is kind of a long one, guys. We're at 40 minutes before I wrap this one up, and then I'm going to be in the group the rest of the day. I wanted to make this one long, though. I know it's me getting back to speed. Do you still hold DBIX and Ella? Machino, I do have DBIX, very, very small position Ella. Since it was such a small cap, I could barely put anything into it. I mentioned Haven. I don't have too many more details about that. They are going to be using the same market maker as Zilliqua mid-June. That's kind of the tip I got. Whether or not that means it's going to move up, it's not for sure, right? I need to kind of figure out how they're going to use that. I haven't actually talked to the team. That's just a contact with the team. So I'll see how that works out. I want to get more info on that. In terms of the small caps I'm still holding, I gave that kind of list of 6. This was in April when alts really started to move. The ones that I still have the most conviction in are Republic Network, which is almost at a 2x. It's about 80%. So Republic Network, I do like Switch.io as well. So Republic Network, Switch.io, DBIX, and that's kind of really it. I actually believe there's one more. Let's see, what was the other one? I'll have to look up the other one. And then Tomo and Loom. You guys obviously know Tomo and Loom. But I haven't been as focused, right? The small caps are kind of those. They're very similar to Bittrex coins, in that I want to hold them when the alt cycle is really moving and when people are posting wins every single day on Twitter. That's kind of when I want to start looking to see if my small caps and if my Bittrex plays are moving. Marcus ETHorse. Yeah, I don't have too much conviction in ETHorse. ETHorse kind of is kind of a that'd be a really, really small bet if they were to do anything. Oh, Surf, that's true. I'll wrap up with EOS, and then I'm gonna kind of end the stream, just because I don't want to make it too long. Machino said, when you say consolidate, do you sell other alt position? Do you buy more of ENG and Mu? Machino, really good question. When I say consolidate, it does mean closing out probably some of exposure of other positions. For me, this time it was Loom. I almost closed that out. I still have a very small position there, right? But consolidating means kind of either trimming your positions or kind of getting rid of some of your positions, right? So moving down to smaller positions. That's what I was looking at there. Surf, seems like a lot of guys have questions on EOS, which is good. So yeah, the thing with EOS, which didn't get down to kind of the second bid that I wanted it to, was I had a conversation with someone, like I said, that I respect a lot in the industry. It's almost like they're never wrong. I don't want to say they're never wrong, but either they're early or they're kind of on point. So they talked about getting into EOS. This is actually kind of last week when I told you guys about it. This would have been 511. So it's still moved down a little bit since they talked about it. But the smarter play, for one reason or another, and at consensus, people were talking about this, was that EOS is going to continue to pump. And kind of the discussion was, what would happen first? Would Ethereum hit, let me just go to CoinMarketCap. Would Ethereum hit 1,500 first, or would EOS hit $30 first? Right? That's kind of the discussion when people were talking about, what would happen. And I used to look at this with Neo and Ethereum, and I would say, I still actually think Neo is undervalued in that sense. I would look at these protocols, and I want to just look at market share. And I'm saying if ETH is kind of the blue chip, or is kind of the blue chip protocol, or is kind of the first mover, and you're looking at upside of other coins, if this is valued at kind of 1/6 or maybe even 1/7 of Ethereum, is this thing going to double before Ethereum doubles? And kind of the talk was, there's so much activity and there's kind of such a Silicon Valley kind of bet and optimism and push behind EOS that right now, even after this run up, right, it still seemed that there was more of a bet where it was a smarter play to be, putting your ETH or moving your ETH exposure, at least some of it, into EOS, almost as a hedge, right? And that was kind of the discussion I had. So after I heard that, and after I heard enough people kind of talk about that, the play that I was looking for was EOS, was this original dip or kind of this previous all-time high resistance becoming support, right? So I do have a small position in EOS, right? But it's one of those things where I'm not looking at this kind of as a short-term trade or to play out. It's more of honestly a hedge for Ethereum. That's kind of how I'm looking at it, even though maybe I didn't share it like that in the alt trades. That's just kind of what I'm hearing. That's kind of what I've heard also a few managers that I would say are kind of some of the top managers in the space kind of talk about. Right? So they really like EOS in that sense. Regardless if it's all hype, regardless if it's vaporware, that's kind of the play. So less conviction. I have a lot less conviction on that play, but hopefully that kind of clarifies what I meant there. Wrapping this up with Bitcoin, guys, I want to keep this definitely below 45 minutes or an hour. I talked about this at the very beginning. Just to run through it really quick again, I want to make sure dailies and 4 hours are closing above the 7,800 level. If it doesn't, my view on kind of this is void, and I'll kind of need to kind of clear the drawing board and say I was wrong, and then we kind of decide the next game plan. Right? I'm never going to be right every single time. So what I'm also looking for on the upside, I want to see a close above 8,400 on the 4 hour. To me, that's a sign that we do move until 92 or 9,400 and test this major kind of fib zone one more time. Maybe those tether grants do help us. Maybe now kind of consensus and that hype has settled and people can now kind of make some decisions. Maybe some people get in after they've now kind of talked about post-consensus strategy going into Q3. I gave you my view. Macro-wise, we've cleared that defining downtrend. I think we move up. I don't want to be blinded by my bias, though. If we move below 7,800 and we close below 7,800, then my view switches, right? And then I was wrong. I'll take the loss on this entry up here, and I'm going to have to kind of reevaluate and look for the next play, right? So that's what I'm looking at for ETH, or not for Bitcoin, and that's kind of what I'm looking at for alts. So I know this is a longer stream. I might have rambled a little bit, but I wanted to get back on the swing of things. I still think we can have a good weekend, guys. I know sentiment is definitely down a little bit. I know May has been a rough month. I do kind of want to keep the bigger picture in mind, keep kind of the year-long picture in mind. I had an hour-long conversation with Ronnie Moaz. If you haven't met that guy or haven't talked to him, I advise you that you do. He has a totally different approach to the game. He kind of only looks at things in a 5-year window and only kind of looks at the top 20 or top 50 coins. But it was refreshing to kind of talk to him. It was kind of refreshing to talk to him. Yeah, Carlos, I think so too. And kind of think about this, guys. I know it is definitely easy to get caught up in the 1 week performance, the 2 week performance. There are going to be ups and downs in this. Continuing to make the right decisions, continuing to kind of follow, predetermined, know where you're wrong, know where we can pick our spots, understand when something's expensive or cheap. And I think, honestly, riding out the bigger trends and following that system, I think we're all going to do pretty well. So it was really good getting back in the stream with you guys. I'll be in the group the rest of the day. I'm going to be working all weekend. I'm going to be working hard now to get this thing back on track. I know it's kind of been lower activity for the last week since it was a free week, but still, I never kind of want to take that much time off. It was kind of eating away at me. So asleep. I got older. But yes, very glad to have you. It's an absolute honor to be working with you guys. I'm happy to be back. Ready to kind of dive into this weekend. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the stream. I'll be in the group the rest of the day. Hope everyone has a good Friday. Welcome to the weekend, everyone. Cheers. Signing off.